Hey guys, welcome back to Through the Woods 360. Les, why don't you tell them what's on the agenda today?
We had a couple of viewers that requested that we make beef stew. So that's what we're going to make today. Now, one of them actually wanted beef stew with dumplings, which if you've never had it, you need to try it. So we're going to show you how to do that here. And it just so happens to be one of this guy's favorite things. He loves beef stew with dumplings. You will too.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start by trimming our beef up because I don't want too much fat in there because I'm not going to be able to take it back out. So we don't want it to be too greasy, but we're going to leave a little bit on. But like this fat on the outside, I'm going to trim this off, and anything that seems gristly, you know, and to each your own. Some people like to eat that. No one around here does, so I usually trim it off. So we're just going to trim some of this fat off. And I will still throw some of this in when we brown. We're going to brown this meat. And I'll throw some of this fat in there, but then we won't throw that in the actual stew. Another thing I'm throwing in it is this bone. I know when we were making chicken and dumplings, we told you about the bones. You've got to have the bone. The bone is so much flavor. I mean, people actually drink bone broth now because it's so awesome for you. So we are going to throw this bone in there, and we're going to cook this bone. We'll trim it out. Just throw the bone in by itself so it's easy to take out. This is all going to get cut up. Trim it up, cut it up, throw a little salt and pepper on it, let it sit so it can draw some juice. Then we're going to heat up some lard. I always use natural stuff. I don't like corn oil or vegetable oil, canola oil. I use that, so I use lard. So we're going to throw some lard in a Dutch oven, in a cast iron Dutch oven, and we're going to go ahead and brown this up really, really good. But there's a couple of steps we're going to do before we brown the meat. Let me cut this meat up and we'll get right back with you and I'll tell you what that is. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to dice up some onion. And I've cut it this way. I heard, I don't know if it's true, that if you leave the root end on, that your eyes don't water as bad from it. With all this breeze out here, my eyes aren't going to water anyway, but it's just force of habit. I do it. Sometimes they still water, but I do it anyway. So we already cut it that way. Now we're going to go through, we're going to cut it a couple times this way. You can use one of them fancy little onion choppers or whatever if you got one. It doesn't matter. We're just going to get us a dice on this. Okay. And I think that's probably enough onion. We have a small cast iron kettle over here. We always call them Dutch ovens, and Dutch oven now seems to be more referred to as something that you would put coals on the top of. So now I try to call it a kettle so as to not confuse people as when we're cooking or baking. So we got some fresh garlic here. I am a firm believer that fresh garlic and fresh onion is way better than anything powdered or dehydrated, so I usually try to use fresh. But we put garlic out in the garden pretty well every year. My dad does, always has. So we've got all the garlic that we want. So we're just gonna get these skins off of here. We're just gonna give it a quick smash. We don't want to dice up this garlic because it's gonna come back out, and it's so much easier to get it out when it's whole. So we're just gonna slip these skins off of here. And if you've ever peeled garlic, we call these toes. I know people call them cloves, but we always call this whole thing a clove. And this was a toe.
Right.
So it was always kind of confusing when I started reading people recipes and hearing people say you put in a 3 cloves of garlic, and I'm thinking, oh my God! Okay. So that's why, and I don't know if anybody else, if anybody else calls this a toe and that a clove, let us know.
Yeah, maybe it's a
regional
geographical thing, or yeah.
It's a possibility. I'm curious. So what we're gonna do is, I've already got the stove lid over there, and we're gonna get us some lard and put it in there. And the first thing we're gonna throw in is we're gonna throw in our onion. And then our onion's gonna come out. The reason why we don't throw the garlic and the onion in together is because garlic, like right now, my fingers are sticky. Garlic has so many natural sugars in it, it will burn before the onion is anywhere near done. What we want to do is we want to cook these onions until they're clear, and then cook them just a little bit further until they start to brown. That gives us a really good caramelized flavor. And the reason why we're doing this is because this onion, then we're going to put the garlic in. This onion and this garlic is actually going to season our lard that we're going to brown our meat in. And that makes a big difference. We'll be right back. Okay, so we got some lard in here, melting, and I usually just put in whatever I think, and then I pull the extra out. I think that's probably enough. If we need more, we can always add some more later. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in our onion first. And when our onion's done, we're going to take it out and put it in a little bowl and save it because it's going to get cooked with our stew. And then we're going to do our garlic. That way I can keep a close eye on the garlic. Now if we start cooking too fast, we'll have to turn it down a little bit because we don't want to actually fry the outside of the onion and brown the onion before it gets clear.
If you didn't adjust that, it's on low now.
It's fine like this. If this were level, I wouldn't need to move it around as often as I do, but we're in the yard. You know, yards aren't level, so.
Tell you one thing, it's a lot more level than the fire pit we had on that North Carolina mountain camping trip.
That sucker looked like somebody drove a dump truck over the edge of it. Maybe a bear sat on it, who knows? It was pretty crooked. That was not a grate that you could set a skillet on and fry bacon in, I guarantee you that.
Somewhere in my photos on my phone, I think I have a picture of us with a round log propped up under one end of the skillet to keep it level.
There was. This smells unbelievable. You ever been, I'm going to compare it to that, but you ever been to, I don't know, a carnival or a tractor show or whatever, and they've got, you know, the carny stands, and they make the Philly steak and cheese, and they got those onions and peppers. You know how those onions smell? That's exactly what this smells like. This is unbelievable. So if you can see in here, some of them are starting to get a little brown, and that's good. Most of them are getting clear. You see how they're more translucent than they were before? Before they were just white and green. But they're starting to get clear. And we're going to get a little brown on here, and then we're going to take these out and put them in a little bowl and do the garlic. You know, and I might not do that. I might actually just throw the garlic in here along with these, because I think these are far enough along. I think.
I can get that for you if you want it.
Yeah, if you don't mind, grab that cutting board and go ahead and stick them in here, Gino. I think we'll be all right.
All right, let me squeeze in here.
Just push her off in there on that side. Okay. Should cut that big one a little bit. I want the garlic to actually be crushed so it releases the oil in the garlic, but I don't want it in pieces because it'll be too hard to fish all of those out of here. And if I leave any of those little pieces like that one in here, then it's gonna burn when I brown my meat. See, now I'm starting to smell garlic too. And you just get it just infuses your oil and gets that flavor into that meat in a little different depth of flavor, which I'm always all about, depth of flavor. You know, food needs to taste good. I mean, granted, it needs to look good too, but it needs to taste good. what's the point of eating something if it doesn't taste good?
Way more important to taste good than look good. It can look good and taste bad. I'm not gonna be interested. But it can look just so and taste good, and at least you can eat it and enjoy it.
And it's not difficult. I mean, I don't think thus far. I don't think that we're beyond anybody. I know, you know, like making pancakes and biscuits and dumplings, and maybe that seems a little scary to somebody, but you're not going to waste any money. If you get too much milk in it, you dump some more mix in it. If you don't have enough milk in it, you dump some more milk in it. And it's all just by how it looks, and the more you make it, the easier that becomes. You're going to have failures. Everybody has failures. I'll tell you what, I've taken food that I made for supper, something I thought was going to be good, sounded like it would taste good, and I've made it, and it was disgusting, and it went straight out in the field, and the coyotes came and ate it. I've had disasters, and that's how you learn. Don't make that again.
Well, at least somebody liked it.
Well, I don't know if they liked it or they were just starving. Now, if you can see and hear this garlic,
starting to brown up a little bit too.
This garlic hasn't been in here nearly as long as the onion. I'm trying to find that piece. See that one? And it's already browning.
Yep.
And that's because the garlic has so much more sugar in it, and that's why my fingers weren't sticky from doing the onion, but it was from doing the garlic. But we're just about ready to take this out of here. And I think we're going to start pulling some of it out right now. So we'll pull this out, and then we'll be back and we'll show you. We're going to get this good and hot. It's got to be good and hot when we throw that meat in there, because that meat's cold and the temperature's going to go down real fast. But we don't want to smoke our lard. Okay, when I said you don't want to smoke your lard, of course, I don't mean put it in a pipe and smoke it. But you don't want to get it to the point where it's going to smoke. Now, how hot is it? Well, let's take a little drop of water and throw it in there. See how it took a minute for it to start bouncing back at us? Watch over here. Now that's getting pretty hot. See how as soon as I flicked that water in there, it started bouncing back at me? That's hot.
And that's a prime example right there why you do not put a frozen turkey in a turkey fryer.
That is correct. Okay, so we're not going to put our bone in here right now. We're going to go ahead and dump this beef in here.
Safety tip for the day, folks. Do not deep fry a frozen turkey.
Okay. I'm just trying to get all the meat coated a little bit with lard. And then we're going to let it go so it can brown.
Well, now it really smells like that Philly booth you were talking about.
Yeah. And we're not going to do a whole lot to it, because right now this juice is going to cook out of that meat, and then that juice has to cook off, and then that meat's going to brown. We're going to throw a little bit more salt and pepper on it now that we got it in there. How about just a little more pepper? Because we're going to add some beef bouillon to this instead of beef stock, because when you go camping, it's a lot easier to bring along a jar of bouillon cubes than it is a box or can of beef stock. And every campground has water. How much pepper you put in here is all according to your taste. How much you like pepper. But I think that's good. So we'll be back with you here in a minute after this starts to brown. We're not going to move this. We're going to let it sit until that juice cooks out of there and we start to brown. Then we're going to flip it over and we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so we've got our liquid cooked out of the beef, and I'm going to be honest, when you use frozen meat, this is frozen, this is from when we butchered, it's actually an arm roast that was in the freezer. When you use frozen meat, it changes. When you thaw it, that juice comes out of it, it just seems like it's a little wetter, like you have more liquid. Not only that, but you've also cut this up, so you've exposed all kinds of places for those natural juices to escape out of the meat, which is great. It makes for awesome flavor when you brown it. However, it takes longer to cook that moisture out of the meat. And you can see you can hear a blind person would have known the meat's going to start browning any time now, because you could hear it starting to fry. You hear a sizzle, and that's what we're doing. So the meat is starting to fry. Now, I'm looking in here, and I don't have a whole lot of oil in here anymore, a whole lot of lard. And that's because as all that moisture, water, whatever you want to call it, cooked out of the meat itself, the steam came up and the grease came up along with the steam. So you lose a certain amount of grease that's in here. So if I think I need to add some, if it looks like we're getting dry, I'll go ahead and I'll add some. But we are starting to brown. I don't know if you can see that piece. We're starting to brown, and when we're wanting to get everything looking similar to that, similar to those couple of pieces there, that we've got a pretty good brown going on. And we're actually hoping, which it might and it might not, because this is an old cast iron kettle. It's a Wagner ware, number 7, drip drop roaster, and you'll see the lid later. Picked it up dirt cheap years ago. I take any opportunity to buy cast iron. People buy cast iron and pay good money for it just to put it in a collection, and it makes me cry. It's like, man, I don't want it for a collection. I want it so I can use it, because old cast iron, if you're looking for good cast iron, you want old cast iron, because old cast iron years ago, the inside of it was actually machined, and you can see the machining marks, and I probably should have showed you when we started, but it's smooth. When you buy new cast iron, I don't care if you buy Lodge or you buy some Chinese cast iron, it's all the same. It's rough, it's coarse, and it's like you can run your hands across it and it's bubbly. And that doesn't, it's hard to make that a non-stick surface like cast iron should be, until you've used it so much that you've worn it down smooth. It has to be smooth, because if it's not smooth, things are going to stick on it. Anyway, I was hoping that we get a little something sticking on in a couple of places in here.
That's browning up nice.
Because then we deglaze the pan with a little bit of water, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. We're cooking really good now. We're probably going to turn this down here in just a little bit, because we made us a windscreen. The wind was giving us a heck of a time, and we couldn't get anything going on. So we wrapped some foil around the front of this to block the wind from our burner itself. It's got that windscreen on the back, but that doesn't help when it's blowing the burner out. The wind actually is blowing the flame out. And then unlit propane was just escaping. That can be a little dangerous to try to relight that. Next thing you know, you're standing in a fireball.
Wow, that's
not the good kind of fireball.
Let me see. Try to get a close-up of that, because that stuff is really browning up nice.
It's looking really good. We do need to reach in here and turn this down, though.
Careful, don't burn yourself.
Well, if I do, it won't be the first time, and it probably won't
I mean,
be the last either.
It's getting a really good color on it. It's browning up really nice.
Yes, it is. And we are getting some stuff sticking on. That's good. Normally, what happens is the meat juices that kind of like caramelize on the bottom of the pan, and that is your awesome flavor. And we're gonna take some water and put it in here a little bit here, and just as soon as I shut up, and which is never, but I will shut up. And we're gonna get that off of there, and you'll see the color of the water here in 1 second.
See, this is what I refer to as the goodness.
That's what it is. It is the goodness. You see all that? You see that color? And that's what makes
that
good gravy.
Like, yeah, I was going to say, that looks like the start of some really good gravy.
That's what makes good gravy. And good gravy does not come out of a jar. It does not come out of a pack. It comes out of a pot. And it comes from browning your meat. And you'll notice a lot of the brown that was on that meat is gone now. Well, that's okay. It's all in there. And that's where you need it. You don't need it to be on the meat. You're not eating this like a steak. You're eating it as stew. But we're just going to cook this a little bit and let it boil a little bit and keep scraping. That's why I like this. You got to get
There's
one of
that
these
tool
if you don't
again,
have
folks.
one. Well, we're going to just keep scraping the bottom of that pan. Let it come back up to temperature and a little bit of cooking, and it's going to take all that sticky brown goodness, as my brother calls it, that's on the bottom of this pot, and it's going to put it into our stock. And that stock's where our vegetables are going to cook, and our meat's going to cook, and our dumplings are going to cook. And you got to have flavor. You got to have flavor. And you can see in here, I put that lard in there and browned it There's not a whole lot of, let it settle out a second. There's not a whole lot of fat in there, but there was enough.
You got to have some for some flavor.
So here in a minute, we're going to go ahead and dump some more water in here. And that's just well water. It's not what the bottle says. I just filled up a bottle with some water from in the house, so plain water. We're going to dump that in here and we're going to let it come up to a boil while we cut up some potatoes and some carrots. And I got some frozen peas, and they're not even in the freezer. I put them in the refrigerator when I brought them home because I don't need them frozen. It's going to cool everything off too fast. I just need the frozen peas because the canned peas have already been cooked and the hull on those peas is soft and it breaks down, and all you'll have is little pieces of pea hull in here, the outside casing of the pea, and you'll just have mush. You'll have like pea soup in here. Frozen peas have not been cooked, so the hull is harder, it's tighter, it holds the inside of the pea intact, it holds the pea in a pea shape. We're also going to put some green beans in it because my dad hated peas and he wouldn't eat them. So every time my mom made stew, it had carrots, green beans, potatoes, onions, of course, you know, like we're going to put back in here. And sometimes, what did she put in there? Sometimes she threw some corn in there. Just all depended on if she had some left over. Stew was basically a way to use your stuff that was left over. Stew and soup. We came from a farming family and we tried to use everything. Nothing got wasted. We found a use for it in one way or another. And that's part of the reason why when we cook this, we're going to throw that bone in here.
And guys, if you're watching what she's doing there and you happen to see our biscuits and gravy episode, it's basically the same process as she was doing with the gravy when she was scraping the bottom of the pan, getting all those little pieces of brown sausage that were stuck to the pan. Same thing. It just carries over from one dish to the next. It's all the basics. Am I right, Les?
Yes, you are. You are exactly right. There's really no difference. I turned this down a little too far and then turn this back up. Now we're going to throw this bone in here. And this bone is just going to cook in here. And I know I told you I was going to throw some of the fat in here, but I didn't have any good fat. And one day when we get into a video and I've got some good fat, I will show you the difference between good fat and nasty fat. And the good fat is actually when you're butchering a hog, you've got lard fat and then you've just got fat. And same way with beef, what they would make beef tallow out of is the good fat. And this round steak didn't have any good fat on it. The good fat, if you know what I'm talking about, is actually, you know how when you have a ribeye, you got a big old chunk of fat that's kind of like that in that ribeye, and it's firm and it's hard, and when you touch it, it's not gelatinous. That's the good fat. That's the fat that will render down into grease.
Yeah, almost similar to a bacon rind, texture-wise, somewhat.
Well, no, it's just.
I mean, not just flabby, gelatinous fat.
Yeah.
It's a firm.
It's a firm fat. It's
firm fat, yeah.
And it's almost like, it's kind of like, I know it doesn't make sense, but almost like it's kind of like a dry fat. It's not as, it doesn't have as much moisture in it. It's not as soft. It's not as stringy. You can actually cut it. We'll show you sometime. It's hard to explain, but we'll show you. But that's why there's no fat in here. Well, we're going to let this come up to temperature and cook with that bone for a while. I'm going to throw my lid on here, and then you'll see my old... Look at that.
Get all that...
You got to picture that?
Get all that good flavor.
Picture
Yeah.
that.
Oh,
I know
yeah.
I'm a little upside down. It actually has to be that way if somebody's trying to read it. But here's the top.
Wagnerware, number 7.
I'm going to kill anybody who is a cast iron aficionado because I bought this at a tractor show at a flea market they have in the fall. And I just got this about 5 years ago. And I only bought it because I love the size of it. It's perfect for a small meal. I got this for $10. Heck of a deal.
We'll let that bone deliver its not only awesome flavor, but collagen as well.
Yes, that bone and that bone marrow. There is collagen in there. And you need collagen for your skin, your joints. People want to buy collagen creams and collagen capsules and all this other stuff. You know, if people just ate like they used to, they'd get it. People ate the bone. My grandpa would take that bone and he would suck that bone marrow out of there and eat it.
That's true.
I've never been able to do that. And
I haven't either.
It's good for you.
But I will cook it and drink the broth, which is equally as beneficial.
That is a fact. So we'll be back with you here in a little bit after this cooks and we get that bone out of there. But we're going to go ahead and peel our carrots, and we are going to cook our carrots separately. So when you come back, we'll have the carrots cooking. Okay, we're going to cook our carrots beforehand. If you watched us before, I had said something about carrots and they have a really pungent flavor. So, Gino, take a look down in this pot of carrots. I cut my carrots up, okay, and this one's this thick, and this one's this thick. I've got different thicknesses in here, and what I've done is the smaller the piece of carrot is, sorry, he's got this already turned on, it's getting a little hot. The smaller the piece of carrot is, the thicker it is, because I want these to all cook at the same time, at about the same time. So you see this one's thinner than this one because this one's bigger around. So that'll let them all cook at about the same rate. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna cook those, and I've got twice as many carrots in there as I need. I'm gonna use, for this size pot, I'm gonna use approximately a handful of peas, a handful of green beans, a handful of carrots, and 2 to 3 handfuls of potatoes. And that'll give us just about the right mix that we need in here for everything to look right for beef stew. But let's have a look in this pot here. We already added our onions and garlic back in here shortly after we were done with you. Now you could cut that garlic up if you wanted to. I throw it in there whole because by the time this beef is tender, that garlic's going to be cooked up to nothing and it's all going to taste the same. But here's our bone that's cooking. And you can see the center still in it. That's the bone marrow. That bone marrow won't really cook out of there, but it'll start to heave out of there. And when it does, we'll pull that bone out. The longer we leave that bone in, the more flavor we're going to get from that bone and from that bone marrow. And this is doing absolutely awesome. We just check it every now and again, make sure it's got enough water because some of the steam does escape, because even in a pressure cooker it escapes. But we're cooking good. We're going to let that cook a while. We're going to get the carrots done, and it doesn't matter if they cool. Everything else is going to be room temperature when we put it back in anyway. And we'll be back with you when we're ready to put this all together and start on the dumplings. Okay, so we're not done yet, but our bone is still in here. It's cooking. But we're going to go ahead at this point and add our potatoes. So I'm going to do, like I said, a handful. Well, it's kind of hard to get a handful, but we're going to go 1, 2. We may have gone on again, Gino.
We may have.
2.
Yep, looks like we did.
We're going to go about 2.5. And we'll stir that up, and we'll see how that looks. This wind is giving us a devil of a time. Okay, I think that looks pretty good because you got to remember we got to add carrots, peas, green beans, and we still have to have room in here for our dumplings. So right now what I'm going to do, this bone is cooking pretty good. That side doesn't look like it, but this side, look at this side. Look how much of that marrow is gone on there. So we're going to, and look what has happened to this bone. Look at the meat on the side of that bone. Can you see that, Gino?
Oh, absolutely.
So it's cooking really, really good. We're going to add a little more water.
I think we went out again.
Since we're definitely going to need water later. Yeah, we keep going out. Maybe turn her up. We'll add a little extra water. We don't want to add more water than we need because as it cooks off, you lose flavor as well. But we're going to need enough for the rest of our vegetables to go in there and for our dumplings. And your dumplings are going to suck up some of that juice as they cook, but they're also going to thicken the gravy for the stew. Okay, so we've pulled our bone out of here that had our little bit of meat and some bone marrow on it, and now we're ready to add our vegetables. So I have about a handful of carrots, probably a little shy on those, but everybody isn't super big on them. And then I got a can of green beans, and it's probably going to be about a half a can of green beans, so we're going to say a handful. Let it roll over. We might throw a couple extra in. I like green beans. And then we got our frozen peas. You remember I told you about the frozen peas. We don't want to use canned peas. They'll fall apart. So we're just gonna let our hand run over. There we go. There's our peas. Now we're gonna give it a stir. Kind of looking like stew already, isn't it? Look at that.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. We could have had a couple extra carrots, but not everybody likes them around here. I do, but not everybody.
Well, and
so
that, and we need to save some room for the dumplings.
So we're gonna let this come back to a boil, and a good rolling boil. I told you about that in the chicken dumplings. I've already mixed up the dumplings for this. And if you have not seen our chicken and dumplings video, watch it and you'll see the whole process. There's one difference. What I did was instead of adding chicken bouillon, I added beef bouillon, 2 cubes. Still a little better than 1.5 cups of mix. And then milk just to make it to the right consistency. And I still used canned milk. And then I added not just some onion powder, about 1/2 teaspoon of onion powder, but I also added 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder. And I still added the fresh ground black pepper. So we're going to be back with you in just a minute after we get a little of this liquid to cook out of here and we let all these vegetables come up to temperature nice and even. Okay, so we're ready to drop our dumplings. Now if you watch the chicken and dumplings video, you know where this spoon's going to go. This is the one I use to mix up the dumplings with. This spoon going right in here. We're going to get it wet. We're going to get it hot. And we're going to take us a spoonful of dumpling. And we're going to drop it in there. And this is not rocket science. We're just going to keep putting them in there, and we're going to try to make sure that we leave a little room between one dumpling and the next. Now, of course, the bigger spoon full of dumpling you get, the bigger your dumpling's going to be.
Heard that somewhere before.
Yeah, so it all depends. And I'm using the same spoons that I used when we did the chicken and dumplings and when we did the milk gravy, and these are pretty well my spoons that I almost always use for cooking. When we got a good rolling boil, I told you in the chicken and dumplings video that you want to have a good rolling boil so that everything stays at the top. That's important. So we are gonna put this last dumpling in here, and then we're gonna turn this down just a little because we are really cooking over here, boys. And we'll be back with you after this is done. You ready to take a look in this pot? How's that look? We let her cool just for a minute before we brought you back. So we got D-Man, Dan the truck man here for the taster today. Bring me your bowl, buddy. How many dumplings? One,
That's
two?
good, right there.
How about one little one? Now this juice in here is thinner because, hold on, we gotta get you some vegetables and juice. Because when you put it in with the dumpling, you gotta have more juice, kind of like the chicken and dumplings instead of gravy. Now if you were gonna make this just as, hold on, you need a little?
That's good.
If you were gonna make this just a stew, you just would have thickened a little flour water and dumped it in there, or cornstarch if you prefer. So, well, Daniel, get back here. We got to do the taste test. You know how to take a taste test over there away from everybody. Get over here now. In front of the camera.
Don't run off.
Gotta have a taste of the
Take
biscuit.
that food and book on out of here.
Dumplings, sorry. Still hot. How's that? Well, tell them what you think.
It's good. Very, very good.
See that? See how fluffy that dumpling is? You see that? Those dumplings are good. Best dumplings ever. Unless you prefer the rolled ones. And we'll do that. We'll do that later on when it gets cold out. Maybe in the woods. We'll make some ham and slickers.
Oh, I
So-
can't wait for that.
Definitely. Okay, well, we're going to sign off here because supper's ready. So We'll see y'all next time. Catch y'all on the backside. Don't forget to follow, like, and share. Through the Woods 360. Love you guys.
Peace out.